if Mr. Trump came back to the White House as president, because he's on record as saying he wants to reduce at least the aid, and most Republicans agree with him. And so that's why actually Putin is fighting partially to that clock. Another, what is it, in 11, 12 months, 12 months. And if that happened, then you would find the cracks in the European facade widening.
There's a fantastic piece in the Times today by Gordon Brown, who really, incredibly robust in his support for Ukraine. He says 70,000 Ukrainians have died, 120,000 injured, millions are displaced, and calls on the West not to give up now, to stand as steadfastly as the Ukrainians have. Do you think there's any risk that may waver now at this point in time?
I think it's already happened, and I think it's been happening for a while. I mean, there's, two things going on there. Well, three in all. One is media coverage, which I could explain why it dwindles away. There are many reasons. And then there's the audience interest, which also dwindles away, partly sometimes because of sense of helplessness, but partly because, well, I've seen that, I want to move on. And when the media sees the figures dropping, they move on as well. But then there's also the hard political reality of for example, countries' munitions supplies being depleted because they're being given to Ukraine, money, et cetera, and at some point, and we've almost arrived there, enough of these factors come together to start making politicians think, well, for how much longer can we keep doing this? Let's put pressure on Ukraine to go to the table. And that is what's been happening over the past few months, I think.
And so that ultimately means that Ukraine would have to compromise in order to, well, it can't continue in this war without the support of allies. So what you're saying is it would force a surrender to some extent.
Well, the biggest part of that would be if Mr. Trump came back to the White House as president, because he's on record as saying he wants to reduce at least the aid, and most Republicans agree with him. And so that's why actually Putin is fighting partially to that clock. Another, what is it, in 11, 12 months, 12 months. And if that happened, then you would find the cracks in the European facade widening. I mean, I think the UK and the Baltic states and Poland, Czech Republic would still be fully supportive, but their support wouldn't be enough. And so, yes, Kate, you're right. At that point, the Ukrainians could try and fight on with very little outside help. Or they could go to the table from a position of weakness. And I think that fatigue is part of that.
Gordon Brown in this piece today is suggesting that there should be a special tribunal. I mean, there are a number of states, 38, including the UK, United States, France and Germany, who've been in talks about creating this now for over a year and a half. He says that would be one way to bring President Putin to task, and that, as Gordon Brown says, he's dealt with Putin before. The only language that he understands is essentially strength. Would that be a good way to move forward, do you think, in the context of what you just said?
Well, I think most things are worth trying, and Mr. Brown is really quite a deep thinker on these things, with obviously experience at the highest levels. So, yeah, sure, worth trying, and he's certainly right when it comes to the idea of understanding strength and weakness and nothing else. But I think, in a way, that's sort of is currently being tried with the very support that goes to Ukraine. On fatigue, excuse me, in general. We started at the top about talking about people's attention spans, if you like. It's hard to beat ourselves up or beat other people up too much about it, because, there's 8 billion people. That means that's 8 billion problems. We've all got our own individual problems. And there's a finite amount of time. I mean, for example, the front page of your paper today, the Times, every single word on that would fit in a 30-minute broadcast. So a 30-minute TV broadcast, where a lot of people still get their news, has only got the information you've got on your front page. So, I think it's inevitable. I've seen it happen so many times, Kate. I saw it in Bosnia, in Libya, and I've seen it again in Ukraine, which has been knocked off the front pages. I
Well,
don't
we
want to
will.
be too kind to the Times, but I do think there's some kudos to Times Radio. I follow the 6:30 broadcast with John Pienaar, where, for a year and a half now, just about every single day, they've done a special segment on it, and
And
I think
we,
that's
yeah,
commendable.